made up facts, not facts, but facts in quotation marks. But here's the challenge. Millions and millions, tens of millions of Americans believe him and believe fervently in what he's saying. And so what exactly do you do? I mean, I've often thought that this is one of the reasons the media gets called so biased nowadays, because, we try to point out these are lies, these are not truths, and then Trump attacks the media for pointing that out, and it seems like we're all anti-Trump, but we're not. We're just saying, it is a lie that he won the 2020 election. And when he says that he did, he's lying. And there's no other way to put it if you're trying to speak plainly and truthfully. How to tackle the fact that 60 million Americans maybe agree with him. That's the challenge.
You write in the book about how the terms left and right emerged, and I'd love for you to explain their origins and how they've perhaps shifted 250 years later.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story that I discovered while doing the research, and so I was so struck by it. So the two-sentence version of the French Revolution is the French king calls Parliament into session after 175 years because he wants to raise taxes. The Parliament says no, and that parliamentary resistance turns into a overthrow of the French monarchy, and that's the French Revolution. So when the French Parliament, was in those days called the Estates General, met for the first time in the late 18th century, it was organized. You sat basically according to your social rank. So the priestly class on one side, the clergy, the aristocrats on the other side, the nobility, and then the commoners at the back. But very quickly what starts to happen is people start sitting along with the people that they agree with, in a kind of perfectly natural process of, where we're hanging out with our compatriots. And the people who were pro the king, pro the monarchy, start hanging out on the right-hand side of the room. And the people who were against the monarchy start hanging out on the left-hand side of the room. Then this parliament moves to Paris from Versailles, which is where the French court had been. It moves to Paris, and they're given a room to deliberate, and that room is rectangular. And the architect finds that the only way he can accommodate everybody is to create these two sets of long flanking rows, one on the left of the presiding chair, one on the right. And all the people who want to abolish the monarchy sit on the left of the presiding officer. All the people who want to preserve the monarchy sit on the right. And believe it or not, it is from that architectural happenstance that for 250 years, we talk about left wing and right wing, left of center, right of center. And so, of course, as you say, it originates in preservation of monarchy. In the 20th century, it really became all about economics. Left wing meant you wanted state intervention, state regulation, taxation, redistribution. Right wing meant you want less taxes, smaller government, less intervention. Now, it's once more morphing, and it fundamentally means, where you sit on these cultural wars. Tony Blair puts it very nicely. He says we're moving from left versus right to open versus closed. In other words, there's a group of people who see all these changes, economic, technological, trade, diversity, emancipation of women, and they view this as a big, fascinating, open world in which they want to participate. And there's another group of people who look at all this and they say, we want to close it down. We want protectionism. We want barriers to trade. We want restraints on technology, and we want women to play a more traditional role. And so it's open versus closed in a sense that is replacing the economic arguments of left and right.
We're talking to Fareed Zakaria, CNN host, Washington Post columnist, and author of the new book, Age of Revolutions, Progress and Backlash from 1600 to the Present. I'm Jen White. You're listening to 1A. We got this email from Peter who says, I would like to know how anti-immigrant rhetoric, like statements by Trump and Orban, affect Fareed Zakaria. I personally am offended by these anti-immigrant statements, though I am a white U.S. citizen. And we should note, Fareed, you were born in India and grew up there. You moved to the U.S. to attend Yale University and say you fell in love with the United States. But to Peter's question, how are you affected?
It's a very interesting question, and I thank Peter for asking it. I've had a completely charmed existence in the United States. I came here on a scholarship from India. I, as far as I can tell, never experienced any kind of anti-immigrant rhetoric, behavior. I found Americans incredibly warm, welcoming, helped me along. It's tough, and you come to a new country. I didn't know a soul. I didn't have any money. And I've found that people have been incredibly generous and supportive. There were two moments at which I experienced some kind of backlash. One was after 9/11, and there was a surge of because I'm not just from India, I'm an Indian Muslim, so there was a surge of anti-Islamic rhetoric, but there was also more anti-immigrant in general. I mean, it's sadly Americans are so often so ignorant about other places that if you remember, the first two people to be killed after 9/11 were two Sikhs, Sikh Indians from I think it was in the south, and Sikhs are a kind of a variation of Hinduism. They have nothing to do with Islam or Islamic fundamentalism. They just happen to wear turbans and have beards, which is what made them targets, I suppose. But that sort of faded after a while. There was some of it. The biggest uptick that took place was when Trump was running in 2015, and he started to use this very nasty rhetoric about immigrants and about Islam and all that kind of thing. So the way I'm tracking this is mostly my social media feed. Where would I get the most hostile comments, the most nasty stuff? And it really got quite high. And I got phone calls at my house. Somehow they found my number, and my two daughters at the time were quite young, in their 9 and 13, I think, or 14. And these people would start calling, and they would pick up the phone, and these people would abuse me on the phone and say all this kind of nasty stuff. And so that was an unnerving period. And then it subsided. And I would say this time around, what's interesting is the sides are so locked in that, I barely ever hear from somebody who's that fanatically pro-Trump. But it's a good example of, I think, the point I imagine Peter is getting at, which is leadership matters a lot. We all have dark sides to us, so we all have angry parts of our personality, and what keeps them in check, I think, is leadership, is what you are given permission to say and what you are quietly admonished. You may be thinking the right thing to say. We live in an open, democratic, pluralistic society. Let's live and let live. Let's be tolerant. You're either getting that message or you're getting the message, no, vent your spleen. Say every dark thing that comes into your head. God knows Trump does. And so it's in a way giving license for a lot of stuff that may be momentary passions of people, spasms of people, but they're often kept in check. That's one of the challenges of civilization and living in an open, pluralistic society, is understanding that you may have the right to say anything and everything you want, but should you?
We got this email from Ted, who says people revolt or flee due to economic realities more so than for class, religious, or personal philosophical reasons. Yes, we are in revolutionary times, but the world has always been. Fareed, when you look at the state of the world right now, and after this deep examination of the historical record, are you feeling optimistic, pessimistic, something else?
I'll take something else for the moment. I think, the point that the email makes is a very interesting one, and it's a place I started with when thinking about this topic, which is that it's the economic dislocation that is causing people the greatest degree of kind of anxiety, and that the rest of it is a follow-on. But there are two things that have happened that have kind of made me wonder whether that's true.
We've got about 30 seconds here.
Okay. One is the countries in Northern Europe that have not had as much dislocation still have right. So there's something else going on, and maybe we can talk about it when we come back.
We're talking to Fareed Zakaria. He's host of CNN's International Affairs show, GPS.